We're going to proceed. We're going to hear from the Rhode Island Commission on Prejudice and Bias. Joe Reddish, Ms. Reddish, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Senator, and good afternoon to all the members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to share with you. The Rhode Island Commission is what we know as one of the best kept secrets in Rhode Island. It was established over 30 years ago in response to profiling. Over the past 30 years, we've had many training programs. Our mission, as was established by legislation, was to study and report on all forms of prejudice, hatred in Rhode Island, and to revise and codify, if possible, all laws relating to all forms of prejudice and bias and hatred. With that in mind, we have a commission that is made up of many members of the community. The legislation has us made up of 3 members of the Senate, 3 members of the House, 3 members of the AG's office, 1 state police representative, 1 municipal appointed by the president and the chief's associate, and 6 community members represented who are appointed by the governor's office. What we've been doing over the past 30 years in conjunction with the Attorney General's office is we provide the front-end training, and that's the one thing I didn't hear talked about so far. Any new officer that comes into the state of Rhode Island, whether it's municipal, state, or university-oriented, goes through a training program related to prejudice and bias. This program is administered by our Attorney General's office and is very specific. It's a day's training, and it focuses on the history of hate. It focuses on the federal crime statute for hatred and bias, so that our officers, when they go out into the field, they really understand how to respond and recognize hate. The program also brings in speakers that are come from different parts of our community that have experienced different types of prejudice and bias, so the office can hear from our community members. What we've tried to do over the years is to continually improve. Our opportunity has been that we only get the new officers. And so one of the things that the commission would like to work with this committee on is as much as we look at the LEOBOR process, we also need to make sure that we're looking at the preventative process, and that's the education process. Right now within the state of Rhode Island, I was very proud to see that our law enforcement teams, chiefs, stepped up before any type of legislation to put the 20 for 2020 in place. But that was part of a partnership, and we supported that from the commission level of being proactive in our communities. We have had, over the last 2019, we had 240 individuals that were touched by our program. In addition, that was law enforcement, and we had 270 community members that were touched by our program, starting back as young as 5th graders and up to some of the college students. And I say that because there's 2 sides to the diamond. There's many facets of what we call Rhode Island, our community, which is our law enforcement, which is part of our community, and then all of our various community members. One of the opportunities the commission has discussed over the past year is that we need to have more programs engaging community with law enforcement. Many of our community, including our legislators, did not know that these trainings take place on a regular basis. And we need to make sure people understand that the training is taking place and that they understand that we are really, as a community, a lot further ahead than what we really realize in our ability for our officers to respond to various situations and various challenges. We look for the commission to provide a program in which, recommend a program in which there's funding. We're funded by VOCA, which is the Victims Act, and we're all funded by grants and what we've accomplished so far in providing these trainings to our law enforcement. We are now in the year 2020, as you know, we've had the challenges over the past few months. It is time now to really make this program really set as part of our budgetary process for our state, to ensure that we have, yes, continued the trainings for our new officers, but there's not funding for continuous education for all of our law enforcement officers. And the Commission on Prejudice and Bias has the foundation already in place to try and build that type of a program so that we support our chiefs in providing ongoing education for our officers and really creating the curriculum that supports their process and making sure that there's refresher courses on things going on in our society. We have a second round of what's a program called Creating Safer Communities coming up, which is our 2.0 program, which was done in conjunction with the Matthew Shepard Foundation. And so that's going to be done by Zoom coming up, and that will bring community and law enforcement, again, engaging in conversations on how do we get better at working together in the processes. This year in 2020, even with the pandemic, we've managed to train 117 law enforcement officers, and we've engaged in 41 key community members. That's not enough. And so what we'd like to do is make sure, as you look at rewriting Leobor and making it better, is that we need to make sure that we give our officers, law enforcement officers across the board, the tools to be successful in continuing to engage and improve their relationships within the community as it ties to law enforcement.
Well, thank you for that presentation, and certainly some of it was an eye opener for me, that the breadth and the depth of the many programs that you've been involved in, and I think we've heard from some of the things that you mentioned. Reverend Jenkins had mentioned some of it, and I believe Sid Wardell too, about the mental health aspects to training, and with the training, not only in the beginning, but as you said, the ongoing education or the professional development. That certainly is something that we need, and that's been presented by other members of the community and members of this commission. So that's certainly something that needs to be considered. The funding, we'll have to see where that goes given the current circumstances, but there's definitely a need, and there's definitely a need for it, certainly if we want to improve the relationships and to build the trust that we really need between the community and law enforcement. And so we certainly need a lot of the things that you said. So I know I appreciate what you had to say, and I do have the letter that you sent initially when this was before the Judiciary Committee. So I do have that letter that you sent. So we appreciate your presentation. Any other questions for Mr. Reddish?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Reverend Jenkins. Thank you, Mr. Reddish, for your presentation. The periodicity of the 107, I think the number you gave was 117 officers that have been trained. Is that an annual, or is that, how often does that come around? Understanding funding is an issue, but how often does that come around? The
trainings are driven based on new recruits coming into the system. Last year, we actually had an extended program, which was our Creating Safer Communities, where we had law enforcement representation from many of our cities and towns throughout the state, which included 100 officers. As I indicated, that program is getting ready to go to a 2.0, and that was funded outside of Rhode Island by the Massachusetts law enforcement group to help Rhode Island as we brought this program forward, along with the Matthew Shepard Foundation. Again, the opportunity is we're getting law enforcement officers at the beginning of the process when they become officers. The Creating Safer Communities was really the first step to to provide training for officers and enrichment training. And that program actually took the specific examples of different situations in a role play type environment, in a group type environment, to talk about how would you respond? Is this hate? Was this bias? Was this prejudice? Or was this just a normal response that needed to be taken place, so they really knew how to implement that training? Those officers were then tasked to go back to their jurisdictions and share some of that information. So one of the things we are working on is trying to do a train-the-trainer program so that it seeds into the different police departments across the state. And the other piece, and I didn't share also, is we work closely with the Attorney General's office. So our website actually has a piece for community to report prejudice and bias, so that we can connect the Attorney General's office directly with a resident, who the Attorney General's office then works with the local law enforcement to start a process to understand what's taking place or affecting a resident as far as any type of prejudice and bias situation. And that program has been very successful. And so I would encourage you to look at the note that I sent. Our website is calloutprejudicerhodeisland.org. And we, again, 30 years, but our commission is really kicked into gear to really, with everything going on, to try and provide as much information to the community to let them know that this is how things are today. Things have changed. It's okay to reach out and ask for assistance, but without asking assistance, we can't assist on either side, from law enforcement, from the commission side, from the community side. So we have to get to a point where people are comfortable asking for help, and that starts the process of bringing everybody together to solve a challenge.
Could I have another follow-up question? What is the cost per head, each pupil for the training?
That's a good question. It's hard to measure that. We get as many people into a class. It's based on the size of the class. Some classes are 20 or 30 officers, some are not. We get a $15,000 grant, and so and part of that's for the administration costs, but the rest of it we use with implementing with the police academy. And so they pay the officers. We bring in the Attorney General's office funds the cost of the trainers going in.
Thank you very much.
Yes, any further questions for Mr. Reddish? Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.